Good morning, boys and girls. I'm here to read chapter 3 of Mr. Gum. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, chapters 1 and 2. This chapter is called Mr. Gum Lays His Plans Like the Horror He Is. And we're not advising any of the tricks that Mr. Gum gets up to in this chapter. We'll see what you think at the end. Here we go. The next morning, Mr. Gum was in the butcher's shop. The butcher was a scrawny old man called Billy William III, and no one knew what the third bit meant. I reckon he was in prison when he was younger, and his number was 3, said Jonathan Ripples. He was the fattest man in town. Maybe it's because he's the third nastiest person in town, said the little girl called Peter. Tell you what I think, said Martin Laundrette, who ran the laundrette. When he was a young man, he was probably in prison. Hey, said Jonathan Ripples, stop stealing my ideas. Shut up, said Martin Laundrette. Why don't you just go on a diet? Of course, Billy William III had his own theory. It's 'cause I'm actually royalty, he would tell anyone foolish enough to listen. I'm third in line for the throne of England, after them other geezers. He always pronounced England in this way. Other words he said funny were hospital, fountain, and funny. Nobody believed Billy William III's story about being royalty, except for Billy William himself, and even he didn't believe it most of the time. But he did enjoy lying. It made him laugh, and not a nice laugh like you or I would have, but a sneaky old laugh on the inside where no one else could see. Anyway, forget it. The important thing is that Mr. Gum had gone to old Billy William III's butcher shop, which was actually called Billy William III's Right Royal Meats, to buy the biggest load of meat he could get his angry hands on. He had a plan. I've got a plan, he told Billy William. Next time that whopper of a dog comes a-playing on my lawn, well, he better just watch out, that's all. My plan is the best. Are you going to be laying down all that meat and poisoning it, so that when the barking fatty eats it, he'll fall down dead? Guessed Billy William. Maybe I am, said Mr. Gum, a little annoyed that the butcher had actually guessed first time about his plan. He had been looking forward to explaining it in great detail and impressing Billy William with his cleverness and his bad heart. Oh, talking of bad hearts, said the butcher, here's 3 pounds of it. It's been sitting out in the sun since last Tuesday. That ought to poison him, no mistake. Why did you leave it sitting out in the sun? Said Mr. Gum, taking the horrible sloppy bag from the disgusting butcher. Well, I like watching the flies go mad over it, laughed Billy William. They're funty. You see, that's how he pronounced the word funny. It's the funtiest sight in all of England. I laughed so hard I nearly had to go to the hospital. Well, thank you, me old gobbler, said Mr. Gum, handing over the money so that Billy William would later discover it was made out of lies and broken promises. And with that, he left the shop. Out in the high street, Mr. Gum remembered he hadn't been nasty to anyone for about 10 minutes. He looked around for some children who might be playing or just walking by or anything. It didn't really matter what they were doing. Even reading a book, that would be fine. Just some children that he could be nasty to, that would be fine. But there were none to be seen, so he went and bought a newspaper. He opened it up, had a photo of a 10-year-old boy who'd just won the World Record Cup reward for secret burping. This'll do nicely, said Mr. Gum, and he scowled at the photograph all the way home, hardly even looking where he was going. At one point he tripped over a stone, which made him feel like the burper was somehow beating him, but that only made him scowl harder than ever. So you see, I've won again, he said with a proud smile, which he quickly turned back into a scowl. Back home, Mr. Gum locked all the doors and the windows, even the broken ones. Then he sat down to think on the old sailor's chest which stood in the front hall. It was a beautiful old thing made of mahogany, which is a type of wood called mahogany, and it was carved all over with amazing scenes of life at sea, with waves and whales and tall ships. Mr. Gum had owned the sailor's chest for over 40 years, but he had never once taken the time to appreciate its beauty. What's more, Mr. Gum had never actually even thought to open that beautiful chest and see what was inside. Had he done so, it might have been a very different story indeed. It might have been Mr. Gum's chocolatey adventure, because I'll tell you something. That old chest had once belonged to a sailor called Nathaniel Surname, the hero of the high seas. One Tuesday long ago, he had saved a Spanish village from being terrorized and destroyed by a terrible pirate called Kevin. As a prize, the village presented Nathaniel with the chest, which was absolutely stuffed full of chocolate. Not just any chocolate, but special chocolate made by the dolphins of the region. And it might just be a legend, but some said it was magic chocolate with fantastic powers. And they always whispered when they said it, which is why it was written so small in the book. How the chest ended up in Mr. Gum's house, nobody knows. But there it had stood for over 40 years, unloved and unopened. As a result, Mr. Gum had never discovered Nathaniel's sugary treasure, which just goes to prove that angry people always miss out on their rewards. They're so busy sniping and griping that they never ever see the good things around them. So, it was that Mr. Gum found himself sitting on a sailor's fortune of what may have been magic chocolate, in terrible ignorance, hatching evil plans. How do I know that these cow hearts are going to be rotten enough? He asked himself. I think I better try eating one myself. If it kills me, then I'll know it's rotten enough to use on the big woofer. He took out a cow's heart and opened his mouth wide. This is one of the craftiest things I've ever done, he chuckled to himself. He raised the smelly, greenish red meat to his lips. I'm a very clever man. Mr. Gum was just about to take a bite when he realized that this might not be such a clever idea after all. He put the heart back into the bag and thoughtfully scratched his beard. Not the beard that grew on his chin, but a spare one that grew on the wall. He used that for scratching from time to time. In the end, he decided to soak the rotten hearts in rat poison just to be sure. It can't fail, he cackled. Old Dogger is in for a surprise that he won't like at all. Oh dear, I wonder what's going to happen next. I'll see you next week for Chapter 4, guys. Chapter 4 is called Mr. Gum Has a Cup of Tea.